From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Later tonight, haunted locations. Here's what's happening. The death toll from a Russian missile strike in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro rose to 40. Dozens more missing, making it the deadliest civilian incident of Moscow's 3-month campaign of firing missiles at cities far from the front. Ukraine says the mass civilian deaths, which it describes as terrorism, demonstrates why it needs more weapons to defeat Russian forces 11 months after they invaded. Russia denies intentionally targeting civilians. Horrible story. U.S. aviation safety officials investigating how 2 planes came close to a collision on a runway at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York on Friday night. Delta Airlines Flight 1943 was headed down the runway for takeoff when air traffic controllers noticed another plane crossing in the departing jetliner's path. Delta Boeing Company 737 came to a stop about 1,000 feet before reaching the point where the Boeing 777, operated by American Airlines Group, was crossing. The FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board, said they're investigating the incident that could have been a disaster. The legacy of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. has inspired people from all around the country to remember the honor of the slain civil rights leader. It was August 28, 1963, when Dr. King spoke before 250,000 people in Washington, D.C.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
He was gunned down while on the balcony of his hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, April 4, 1968. They say 90% of online content could be generated by artificial intelligence by the year 2025, according to some experts. Let's check in with our expert, Lauren Weinstein. Lauren, what's this all mean to us?
Well, these kinds of predictions don't usually impress me very much because there are so many unknown factors in the real world. I mean, obviously, what kind of content are we talking about? Are we talking about written content? If so, where is it? Social media sites, news sites? There are already some controversies about some news articles on the net being written partly or completely automatically, and this has been going on for years now. What about video, which makes up a very large percentage of Internet content now? Is that what they're talking about? Not to mention email, and well, the list goes on and on. Then, of course, the next question is, are we talking about content that is identified as being created by AI systems or material that is purposely not identified as AI created, either for neutral or nefarious reasons? And actually, another question is the content, what is the content being used for? Is it being used to spread hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, accurate information? Is it being used for illegal purposes to mislead or confuse in critical situations? It's an endless list. Right now, of course, there's rising concern regarding AI, especially at schools, because of students that are starting to use these systems to write essays and use them to cheat on homework in various other ways. Now, this isn't entirely new either, of course, because there have been ways for students to buy reports and term papers and such pretty much forever. But the ease of use and the often very high quality of the results from these AI systems is of particular concern now. One interesting aspect is that some of these AI systems produce written materials that appear to be human written and can pass that test, even though various of their facts may be entirely wrong. So there's increasing concerns overall about the accuracy of these systems in these kinds of contexts. Now, as you might expect, schools all the way up to colleges and universities now are starting to take steps to try to deal with this. Some schools have blocked these AI sites from their networks, but that's not likely very effective. Not only does that prevent these systems from being used for educational purposes, but most kids have data plans they can switch over to on their phones anyway. They're not dependent just on the school networks. And cell phone jamming isn't really viable and is generally illegal in the U.S. except in situations, very limited situations like federal prisons, for example. One likely possibility is that many schools will start requiring more and more work to be done in class rather than at home. Mm-hmm. So it won't be as easy for students to surreptitiously use these AI systems. So, yeah, I think there will be a lot of adaptation in various ways to deal with this. And it's just as well, I think, that this process starts now, because these AI systems are mainly going to be getting better and better. We can be sure of that, so we'd better get used to them.
Is this happening faster, Lauren, than you ever thought it would?
It's not necessarily happening faster, but it's happening in ways that were difficult for anybody to predict. In other words, when we talked about AI systems a few years ago, we weren't necessarily talking about them in terms of schools having to worry about students, using them to cheat on their homework or to cheat on tests. The ability of these AI systems to carry out dialogue is moving along much faster than most people have had expected. But again, one of the side problems here is that they can carry on dialogue, and you can ask them questions, and they can give you really great-sounding answers that seem like they were created by humans, but a lot of times those answers are incorrect. So we ultimately find ourselves, even with these advanced AI systems, we find ourselves back in that very, very old slogan that goes all the way back to the dawn of computing and punch cards, the garbage in, garbage out. It still applies today.
You got it. Lauren, thank you so much. Lauren Weinstein, who watches the Internet for us. As you know, we look at the cosmos quite a bit these days, and Dr. Sky, Stephen Cates, is with us. Stephen, what do you have for us this week?
Well, hi, George. We begin with a solar update. How about this? Massive sunspot group, active region 3190, has a sunspot, George, 4 times the size of the Earth. What's it doing? It's moving into position for a possible X-flare, or CME. There are now 9 major sunspot groups on the sun. But transitioning to astronomy, George, what's a black hole without an event horizon? Well, that's the boundary where the velocity needed to escape exceeds the speed of light. But astronomers have proposed a new type of massive star with the gravity of a black hole, but without the event horizon. What is it? It's called a Buchdahl star, named after the Austrian physicist Hans Adolf Buchdahl. These would be the densest objects in the universe which can exist without becoming a black hole. Thus, the force of gravity would be in balance with the other forces, thus mimicking a black hole, and the search is on for this type of new star. It would be different from a neutron star and a dwarf star, and this type of star may give us our first look inside what the mechanics are of a black hole. George, in space, we know that 2023 will be an exciting year, but as SpaceX moves forward, they plan to launch even more massive and powerful rockets. On Sunday night, SpaceX launched the 5th of the Falcon Heavy rockets with a classified Space Force satellite from Florida. But here's some news. Get set for the launch of SpaceX's Starship 24 and the massive booster number 7, a massive rocket to be launched possibly as early as March from Space Base Texas, from a 450-foot-tall high rocket launch tower, simply known as Mechazilla. Each Starship rocket has 6 Raptor engines producing 500,000 pounds of thrust each, as well as the massive Booster 7, get a load of this, with 33 Raptor engines, creating 16 million pounds of thrust. That would be the most powerful rocket in the world once launched. Its propellant is liquid methane and liquid oxygen as fuel, but the returning booster rockets and future Starships will be captured by Mechazilla's massive arms as they make a return soft landing. It sounds like science fiction, but it's real. The first orbital flight of Starship is coming, hopefully, in a few months. We wrap it up always with the live sky. The moon returns to New George on Saturday the 21st. It's simply the best time of the month to spy on Comet ZTF in the morning sky, but truth always, binoculars would be needed. A great planetary conjunction that you don't need binoculars. This will be the beautiful planet Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, and Saturn. They'll be 1/3 of a degree apart on Sunday night, January 22nd. Look to the southwest sky after sunset, a super close conjunction. Then if you miss that, on January the 23rd, the thin crescent moon, Venus, and Saturn do it again, and they form a nice trio with all these objects within 4 degrees after sunset in the southwest sky. We always recommend theskylive.com and love the emails at drsskyshow@gmail.com. What do we say? And we mean it. Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. I'm simply your navigator on the highway to the heavens. And, George, thank you so much.
Great navigator, and we'll talk to you next week, Dr. Sky. Up next, we're going to continue chatting about the cosmos and science fiction on Coast to Coast AM. Well, you just heard me talk about Marvelous Entertainment, and the man behind it is Marvin Sunderland, who's with us tonight. Marvin is a dynamic author, philosopher of natural space phenomenon, and extraterrestrial design. He is a veteran of the United States Army, and he likes to share some war insights with readers and listeners to grab their attention, making them feel as if they were right on the battlefield but in safe conditions. He's not only an author, but has become quite known for his web development, game development, and diving into the movie industry. And here he is back on Coast to Coast, Marvin Sunderland. Marvin, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Looking forward to this.
Really like it.
Where did you get your science fiction mind? It's fantastic.
So I always had a knack for having a great scientific background with a lot of the people in my family. Everybody always kind of like had different ideas of way how things are, not only for how they think, but everything they saw, whether it was a movie, a comic book, or just look it up in space.
Were you interested in space when you were a kid?
Yes.
Yeah.
I always had a telescope and was always out in the backyard just staring up in the sky.
I was the same way. I was raised in Detroit, and I would take my telescope out when it was 10 degrees, but it was worth it. It really was. It was fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the 7-novel series that we've been talking about in this program for so long.
Yeah, so I created 7 novels based on a sergeant by the name of Sergeant Leonard Waggit. Now, this sergeant, he's actually a real guy. I knew this guy named Leonard Waggit in the Army. He got injured, and now he's considered as, I guess, the living Iron Man.
Yeah.
I can't go into details about it because of, policy information about him. But, however, he always had this idea about wanting to save the world. And so I asked him for his permission to use his name, and I decided to put it into our books to where the Earth is physically dying. Now, we know that the Earth is dying, but it's not going to die for like 1 million years. However, our government and everybody thinks, well, we need to act now. So in the books, Sergeant Waggit is out somewhere in Afghanistan, and at the same time, they put together this big ship that can go around and collect all the different elements that the Earth has on the periodic table. And it's basically just to replenish everything that we lost. And then there was a sergeant that was supposed to go on the mission. However, the sergeant got sick, and so Sergeant Waggit came in to take his place. Now, Sergeant Waggit is the least ranking person on the ship. So as they go out in space, just like me being in the military, along with this guy, one thing that I've found is equipment always fails, no matter what.
No matter what. That's true. No matter where you are, it'll happen.
And so when they go out to travel to the closest little galaxy cluster to collect these elements, or at least try to, their navigation system malfunctions and sends them off somewhere in the absolute nowhere in the cosmos. And when it comes to, they find out that they're in the Andromeda galaxy, which I believe is over 450 million light years away from Earth. And they were there within 20 seconds with the system that this ship had, which was, in my story, I put a gravity drive system, which would help bend space, time, and continuum to allow a vessel or something to go through space at a faster rate than speed of light.
How have you, Marv, been able to blend science fiction with reality? Because you've done a pretty good job with that.
Yes, everybody always tells me that I have this fascinating mind about taking something in science fiction and add reality to it, and they always want me to make something about it. But at the same time, the way how I write, and when people read my books, they're like, you write like Shakespeare. Because the way how the context is written and then the dialogues are put in, the dialogues are not directly into the system. It's kind of like their own little world, as like how Shakespeare wrote his stories. And so everyone's like, well, how'd you do when you were in math and English and all that? And I'm like, hey, the teachers told me to get up and teach a class. So,
well, it's great work. And a little bit later on, we'll talk about your second 7-novel series you're thinking of working on that has to do with black holes and things like that. When you look at real science, do you get a lot of ideas from that?
Yes. In fact, science goes both ways. So science has negative science, or which I call fake science, and then there's also real science. And so fake science, for example, is like when the James Webb telescope went out in space, right? All of a sudden, the very same day it was launched, there's all of a sudden all kinds of images all over the net saying this is what it performed and everything. And I'm like, how is that even possible? It's not even it's not even open yet. How could they even get such images? And then, but yet when it's posted and it's live and I can see the actual images from NASA or, you know, some organization, then I can see what they're actually looking at. Science, to me, you know, I really like science. When I was in high school, I used to get into the earth science and get into all the different elements and rocks, and I had a big collection. My mother always was driving me crazy about where am I going to do all these rocks. And
you kept them in boxes and everything, I bet, under your pillow.
Well, I had a tumbler, too, so it'd make all this noise. It's like, what are you doing? So,
some of your favorite movies as a kid turned into some of the ideas for the novels. What were they?
So some of the favorite movies that when I was a kid was like Star Wars, for example. I grew up in the area where Star Wars was there, and I was born in 1979. It's actually funny, but the same day that I was born is the same day the movie Alien came out.
Ah.
And my mother said, there's the little alien.
There he is.
But as I got older in the late 80s and everything, when I can actually go to a movie and understand it, I really got into Star Wars. I was able to watch them. I thought it was great. I was like, now with films, my stepdad always watched a lot of Star Trek. And one thing that always tripped me up the most was the difference between a TV show and a there where when I watch an old Star Trek show and they show a ship going by, you see a stick underneath it. And you're like, huh? Why is there a stick? And then I thought, well, it's a prop, you know.
Or a string.
Or something. But when you watch Star Wars, you don't see nothing.
No.
It's like, okay,
it's
they
amazing.
built this thing in the 70s and 80s. How could they have all of that built without having anything shown, which is really cool. And a lot of people told me that they use potatoes and stuff, which was really entertaining.
Now it's all computer generated.
Yes, the CGI or the computer interface that's used on all these films now is unbelievable, and the price to make such films are insane. Like, for example, James Cameron, the last film he put out, that new Avatar, Way of the Water,
and that's a classic.
Said it was like $2.2 billion to create that movie. I'm like, huh? That is just, to my mind, I'm a mathematician, so I can concept the money, but when you wrap it around it and find out how many jobs were involved and all that, compared to like something back in the 70s, it's just different.
It sure is, but it's amazing that how many people are interested in sci-fi. Next hour, we'll start taking calls with you, Marvin, and you'll see the amount of people that are interested in science fiction and all that. And when you wrote the 7-novel series, how long did that take you?
So that's actually a good question. The first novel, I think, was like the hardest one altogether, only because I have so many different thoughts I had to put down. And when I get all these thoughts, it's like, okay, where do I put it? Even though I got outlines for each novel, and at first I originally had 14 novels written out for my first series. But then I had to cut a lot of information out and kind of narrow it down to what I really wanted to focus on. But my first one took 2 years to actually write. When I was done, it's like it kind of sped up the process because I can go, okay, well, this is what's going to happen next. And as I went through, I started getting more ideas. I would start asking other people, especially when I got my 7th one. That one was like a tie-up, and I had to really think about how to use it, how to put things in there, how to put content in there without fraternization on things. Like I added a band in there and I put specific terms, but I actually had to reach out to people to use their names, stuff like that, just to make sure it's okay. But, and of course, I don't know if you have read the stories yet, but,
yeah, I've read a few of them. Hold on for a second, Marv. We're at a break. We'll come back and pick it up right there on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast, George Norrie with you. We're back with Marvin Sunderland, who is also a web developer and game developer. We'll talk about the game developing in just a moment. Marvin, this mix between sci-fi and reality is so important with what you do, and you handle it quite well.
Yes. Sci-fi and reality is just a really good thing that I like. Trying to put the mix together and have that sci-fi mix with the reality in one, to most people that might be very difficult to do. To me, it seems like just take a walk.
Well, I really enjoy the reality of the Sergeant I-Waggit character who's trying to save us all. I can't give too much away, but he's one of a kind. And when you said that he was a real person, is he still with us? He's still alive?
Yes, he's classified as top secret, above top secret. The only thing I can say about him is he has kind of a rough life. What happened to him was he stepped on a mine when we were over in the military together.
Yeah.
He was a good friend of mine. I thought he was gone, but the guy actually lived. And the military put him in a nemesis program to keep him alive for sentimental reasons. And without going into real details or anything, he's kind of like a living Iron Man. So he has iron from head to toe, and he weighs like 1,000 pounds, but he can run like super fast. And they use him kind of like a cyborg kind of person to go into battle, and he'll take out an entire unit just by himself.
Wow.
And yes, he's still alive, but the only thing that's bad about him is he has to do Zoom meetings or whatever to his family, because now his children are older now and they have grandkids, but when we were in together, he had like a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they were just confused of what happened to him.
Sure. Do you think an alien invasion is possible?
That's right up my alley. I really think that it is absolutely possible. Not only the fact that, and just like how all these different movies are, honestly, I think the way how the movies are is they're actually preparing for an invasion, because they're brainwashing or telling everybody exactly what's going to happen. And then when it actually happens, we're not having a spaz attack or, freaking out over it. But I do believe that it could happen, yes. I mean, otherwise, the vast space that we have, there's so many different galaxies, so many different solar systems and possible civilizations out there. At any given moment of time, they could have some kind of gravity drive system, like what's in my books, and fly straight to our planet, kind of like in the movie Battleship.
Yeah.
They send out a deep space satellite to some unknown charted planet, and it's in the habitable system, and all of a sudden they got hostile aliens on planet Earth.
And these ETs, I think in reality, Marvin, are not all friendly. They've got this nefarious purpose behind some of them.
Yeah, I would think a lot of the extraterrestrials out there may be defensive in some form of way, whether they're defending their own kind or maybe they're defending their ship or, their town or whatever they consider town. If they come to us, it's like Columbus and Indians, we'll be the Indians, they'd be the, Columbus coming to here, where if we go there, it's the opposite. And they're going to defend their property, any means necessary, just like our culture does. I mean, we defend everything that we have.
Let's talk about gaming for a little bit, Marv. It is a huge industry, and people, not only kids, but adults are into this. And, in my day, it was the Madden football games and Pong and stuff like that. I mean, they've really changed, haven't they?
Yes. Yes, in fact, I actually remember my very first game I played was Pitfall on the Atari. And I still remember the sound. It goes, but
do that again, Marvin. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's but the graphics on it. See, back then we had the old TVs. If you take Pitfall and put it on the new TVs today, it just doesn't comprehend the type of pixels or anything.
Right.
But the old TVs did, because they can relate to it. But if I look at that old game and I compare it to today's game, it is just unbelievable.
Well, do you remember the black and white Pong, where we just sat there with a little tiny dot?
I remember the black and white Pong, but I can't remember the top score that I used to get. But I do know that everybody I played, I always beat them.
You're pretty good at that. But, I mean, when you think of it today, what an incredibly boring game. You'd see this little white dot go boom, 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 and that's it. And today, gaming development is unbelievable. It's a huge industry, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, I was browsing Google Play the other day, and I actually found a company that developed a new version of Pong. And it's the same Pong, but you actually have to use your phone gesture to make it happen instead of, like, buttons or whatnot.
Are a lot of these games interactive, too?
Yes. Most of them are interactive. Not all the games are, but some games are just boring, and I just get rid of them. But most of them are interactive.
Some of the action in these games are so realistic. What about the ability to put yourself in the game?
Yeah, so we're actually putting together something to actually do something new for the market, for people and everything out there to actually do a little bit further than what it is. But virtuality is just phenomenal. But imagine putting yourself in virtuality. I always thought if I was in a game, if I looked in a mirror, am I going to see the character or going to see myself?
Right.
And, of course, there's a real fine line that I always find about this. But the fine line would be, if it's virtuality, would virtuality become reality and reality become virtuality? Some people leaving their house might think they're still in a game.
That is, it's amazing. Tell me how you got involved with Marvelous Entertainment.
Yeah, so I all started with meeting up with my business partner, and when we got together, we decided to go ahead and build everything over what I had originally created. He saw something that was really great and grabbed a hold of it, and we worked together as best as we can to get this thing going and move forward and take my books that I originally created and put it into other things. Like we're putting it into comic books, putting it into video games, and then hopefully we can move it into the movie system.
And if that movie system works, will that be based on the novels?
So it'd be based on the novels and the comic books. It could go both ways, where the novels could be, animations versus live-action film, or the comic books could go the same way.
Marvin, tell us about the second 7-novel series that you're working on that has to do with the black hole. What's the premise?
Yeah, so the black hole is like a whole separate book that I have that's not actually part of the 7 series. But and I'll get to that in just a sec. But the second series is actually really cool. I kind of like watching Star Wars a lot, and they have the Star Wars stories and all that. So I kind of had a little twist to where, like, the first book kind of goes over the main character. Throughout the books, it kind of leads through the character, but you don't really get to understand the character. And so the first book will actually lead that whole character, and you get to explain, like, how he joined the military, how he became a drill sergeant, how he ended up moving on and becoming an astronaut. And then, but in the first one, we have an enemy that takes the massive weapon in our book out of our hands. And the second one is to reunite this weapon together, but in the good hand and not the bad hand. And you have to fight unbelievable things that are just out of this world.
Right before you came on, I was talking to my internet guest about artificial intelligence and how they believe it's going to be a driving force up to 90% at least in the future. That's amazing. What do you think of artificial intelligence?
So, artificial intelligence, I believe that AI is going to expand into everything that we do. I mean, literally everything. Right now, I mean, we already have it in self-driving cars. There's flying planes with transponders, which talks to the airport and tells when it's going to fly. And, you won't get me on one of those planes. And then there's machines like Alexa that runs your homes and everything. And I think in the future, AI may be in charge of all humanity.
Is that a good thing or is that bad for us?
Well, it could be good and bad. The good thing is it could give self-organization where there's no more wars or everybody's in order. But also it can be like a dictatorship, where it's going to run everybody and tell everybody what to do.
And literally take over.
Yeah.
Wow. Would there be a mastermind behind it? I mean, somebody has to program this, or would it start thinking on its own?
Well, originally when AI was built, it was based on original concept that people had in their mind. And like how I always think as a programmer, program is only as good as the man, the person who's behind it. However, AI has evolved to where it rewrites its own program, and it redefines how the program is.
That's kind of dangerous.
It can be, especially if it gets in the wrong hands.
And now you're a web developer too. What came first, web development or game development for you?
Actually, I originally started with web development. I was actually going to build a web game for Facebook, and then I got into all the hard coding and the back end and all that, and thought, well, this is a little over my pay grade. So then I got into the mobile game instead when mobile had came out. But I originally started with the web before mobile was really announced around the world, and kind of led me into that, getting from a full stack engineer to an Android engineer, along with C# and C++ for Unity.
Did you teach yourself all this?
Most of it's self-taught. I did go to the Art Institute to also help learn, and they have taught me a great deal. In fact, most of the classes, the teachers would just sit back and tell me to stand up there and teach the code because I was helping everybody, and they're like, you know what, I can just take a break.
We're talking about space, game development with Marvin Sunderland. Take the calls next hour, so if you've got some experience in this arena, jump on board. And where do people get your 7 novels, by the way?
So they can go to marvelous.com. That's marvaleous.com. That's where they can get it now. They can also get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Great. And
now, Amazon and Barnes & Noble is paperbacks.
What do you recommend? They pick up all 7 at one time or one at a time?
Depends on the reader, but I would recommend doing all 7. And the reason for that is because even though each one has its own preface or prologue, as they call it, but however, it's best to have all 7 instead of just randomly picking one, because if you random pick one, you're stuck somewhere in the story. It may tell you a little bit about the beginning, but you'd want to read the other ones before it.
When are we going to see this on television?
Very soon.
You're hopeful about that?
Yes.
Sounds like you got a deal coming. Maybe? You can't say it, can you?
Yeah, if we did the TV, there is we are talking with ABC 15. We may be working with them.
Good for you.
Moving it into the CW61 channel. That'd be pretty cool. Not only that, there's also the Hulu channels. We could be looking into that and getting out there.
What is it about space, Marvin, that just excites you?
Other than everything in space, but what excites me the most is just like my other novel for the black holes. Infinite knowledge, it really defines this understanding of how knowledge can be packed all in this huge arena that we're looking at from Earth. and we're only just in a little tiny speck in this cosmos that we're in. And I really like the fact that how there's so many different colors and different types of stars and nebulas and all these voids. And it's funny how they explain voids, where recently they found a void that they claimed for the longest time there was nothing there. Now they say there's a lot of galaxies in there that they never saw before, now that James Webb has actually found. And so there's always these new mysteries, things they discover. And for the longest time, everyone always said, oh, the universe is so old, and now they're discovering galaxies that are older than the universe, changing the date of the original setting.
And you've got a brand new website called I-Waggit.com. I want to spell it for everybody. IWAGGIT.com. And that's an accumulation of all these things you've done, isn't it?
Yeah, so I-Waggit.com is all driven towards our comic book line. We're taking all of our novels that we have and adding a whole new different series of different tales that are in between each novel, and putting in a whole new comic book series.
Good for you.
Or graphic novel, as people would see it as, and allow them to be able to hear and read about that information that they want to hear that wasn't in the original novels.
Marvin, we've got a final hour to go with you, and we're going to open up the phone lines to give folks an opportunity to talk with you about gaming, science fiction, books, you name it. And this is the hour we'll take your calls with Marvin Sunderland, author and game developer, and jump aboard with your calls when we come back. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Marvin Sunderland. Marvin, you called the novels graphic novels. Tell me why.
Yeah, so there's a difference between comic books and graphic novels. So graphic novel generally is if it's more than 20 pages long.
Okay.
They call it a graphic novel only because it kind of goes into a story and there's more to recall from it. And if you have a secondary graphic novel or something, you know, it's like a series. So you want to read the other one before that first one or before the next one. How
big are video games on television, on your TV, as compared to your smartphone?
It's actually a really good question. So, video game, I just downloaded another game for my PlayStation 4, and that one required over 50 gigs of data to be put onto the card, the external drive I have. Versus if I was to put that on my phone, I don't even think my phone could even handle that much data. I know Google's been sharing a lot of new data onto their server now, where you can put a little bit larger game on there. But right now, I believe on Google it's still between 1 to 5 gigs of data only.
Is that a lot?
For a smartphone, yes. For a PS4 game, no.
No, that's not. But everybody's using their phones for everything these days.
Oh, yeah, it's unbelievable. Everywhere I go, I see everyone having their phone on there. Even when people are driving, people have their phones in their hand.
That's dangerous, but you're right. Oh, you're right about that. I've seen more accidents happen with people looking at their phone than looking on the road.
Yes, and it's becoming more impressive every day.
How do you think the media handles space coverage?
So the media, I would say it depends on, what media you're looking at. Some media has space coverage that covers a little bit of space, where other media covers a vast variety of different types of interesting facts that go on. For example, I follow Riddle on YouTube. He has over 5 million followers, or people that subscribe to him.
Amazing.
And this guy covers variety of different types of space things, not just space, but also conspiracy stories and just about everything else.
That's fantastic, though. 5 million people.
Yeah.
That's huge. It really is. What do you think is fueling the interest in things like games?
Oh, so there's a huge spike in interest that everybody's seeing through the internet, TV, all that other stuff. I believe, let's see, what is this? 1, 2, 3. 4 years ago, I was watching TV one time, and on Fox News, they had a broadcast that they were showing an exo solar system. Basically, it's a whole other solar system in another area within our galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah, we just made a big discovery of this new solar system, and they were broadcasting across the, TV live. And everybody was like freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, there's this new solar system. It's probably going to have aliens. And, just everybody was just going nuts. And, but yeah, it's just lots of information, lots of everything going on. And I know social media is blowing up with it. A lot of people are going outside. They're observing more and more, UFO phenomenons that are occurring in the skies.
It's incredible.
People are, ever since the first moon landing, everyone's still intrigued on the fact that the moon could be hollow. Like when Apollo 11 landed, they say when the ship hit the ground of the moon rang like a bell.
There's some who believe it was towed into place, too.
Yeah, and now the government wants to go and mine the moon.
Could be a lot of resources out that way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we don't know what the dust and everything is actually compiled of. It could be full of diamonds as far as we know, which would be very cool to have.
Let's take some calls here for you as they're lining up. Let's go to Greg in Miami, east of the Rockies. Hey, Greg, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's Carlos. Sorry about that, George.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm honored to speak to you again. And welcome, Marvin. Nice to hear you're here. Great guest. I have an idea for you. What about an alien craft that crashes and the U.S. government captures an alien in it alive, and the alien states that in his planet they're able to capture the soul, and they put the people that whenever they want to change from their regular bodies to an AI, they go into like an MRI machine, and it captures the electricity, which is the soul, and it goes into the AI machine. And he says, the alien, I'm 4,000 years old according to your Earth years, and I can continue changing my soul into a different AI. What do you think of that?
That's actually pretty cool.
Novel idea.
What kind of system would that be on?
Carlos?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. You think that could happen, Marvin?
Arf?
What kind of system would that video game be on, by any chance?
Well, I'm just I came up with this, and I thought that maybe it would be something like an MRI machine that could actually capture the electrical impulses that come from the from our brain, which is we're all composed of electricity. So basically, It would capture the soul because the soul is in the brain.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Carlos. That's another idea for you, Marvin.
Oh yeah, that's that was a great idea.
Now the name of your books are called I-Waggit?
Yes.
Tell me about the title. I know it's off of.
It's kind of like I'm sorry. It's kind of like iRobot in a way, except this is referring to the first person point of view of Sergeant Leonard Waggett, where he's always referring to himself.
Like iRobot?
Yeah, like iRobot in a way. And he's always like, it's all about me kind of thing.
Since you've been doing this, which is now over a span of how many years?
For the first seven.
First seven.
So for the books and everything, is like the last couple of years. I would say 2.5 years.
What came first, the writing of the books or the web development or game development?
Actually, I would say it would be the web development, and then I got into game development working for 4 different companies, whether it was in Arizona or in Oregon, and then I got into the books afterwards.
Next up, Frank is in Montana. Welcome to the show. Hey, Frank, go ahead.
Hi, I like your show tonight. It's good ideas here.
Fascinating stuff.
Well, yes, I'm wondering about the possibility of alien invasion of artificial intelligence with our modern politics, such as Hunter Biden's mother, who her first name was Nyla, spelled backwards as alien.
Really?
And then also the Wizard of Iz, which was President Clinton. This is all very interesting,
Well, you juxtapose those things. There's some weird synchronicities to all this stuff, Marvin, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If an ET's group came down, if they really came down, which I think they may already have, do you think they'd do anything nefarious, or do you think they'd be good?
Honestly, I think they would be either trying to use us for guinea pigs, or they would at least come down and try to do like how we would with everyone else and say we come in peace kind of thing. But then it could be like the movie Mars Attacks, where they say they're doing good and the bird flies off and they go crazy.
You may have been too young, but do you remember the Twilight Zone series in the episode To Serve Man?
Yes. In fact, my wife's side of the family, they always loved all the older films, so I always got a chance to watch all of those.
That was a classic, of course, and To Serve Man turned out to be a cookbook. Who knows what could happen, right?
Right. We have no idea what could happen, but with all of the content that is driven throughout the whole world and everything, we would have an idea of what to expect.
Let's go to our skeptic, Walter, in Pennsylvania. Hey, Walter, how are you?
All right, George. Hey, just call me Skeptical Swearcheck. My surname is Swearcheck.
You got it.
Yeah, George, I was telling Tom how we differentiate science fact from science fiction and how we discern reality from fantasy is by being skeptical and being critical and being scrutinous of the data that enters our brain.
There's nothing wrong with being skeptical because it's pretty smart to investigate.
Well, George, it can be argued that's how we maintain our sanity, because one of the definitions for insanity that psychiatrists uses when you can't differentiate reality from fantasy. Now, I think, Marvin, I want to just put a little a mind bender around Marvin, if I may. We talk in science fiction. We talk about traveling at the speed of light. Well, wouldn't traveling at the speed of light be tantamount to what they did to Ted Williams? Because traveling at the speed of light, we would be putting ourselves in an Einsteinian state of you might call it suspended time suspension.
And let me explain what they've done to Ted Williams, Marv, in case you don't know. The great baseball player, of course. When he died, they have frozen him cryogenically, and they have his head separated from his body. And one day they would hope to clone the body, get a young Ted Williams, and put his brain inside or download the information into the new body. And then you got Ted Williams again, but he's 20 years old. Now that's science fiction.
That is science fiction, yes.
But it's possible. It could be very, very real.
That would be something that, we would see in the near future that would absolutely happen, probably on a mass scale.
I don't know if I would do it. Would you?
I mean, it's risky. I mean, you don't know whether you're going to be alive or, if you're going to come back from it or not, or maybe it could be like a clone, where you come to life, but the only thing you remember is maybe all the past history stuff and nothing new, or who knows.
What has fueled the interest in gaming? What has really made it as big as it is right now?
Yeah, so gaming has become the interest of everyone in the world to stop what they're doing, like working all the time and just being there and doing absolutely nothing, to actually sit down and watch something that is interactive and make them have to think and logically understand how a character moves or a ship moves or or something, where versus like if you're watching a movie or something where you just sit there and watch things go on and on and on. However, video games are becoming more vast in the world to where they need to add breaks in there. They've actually had people that would sit for hours, sometimes days, playing video games and not even get out of their chair.
Wow. They don't even eat. They pass out.
Yes, I've actually had a buddy of mine where he called me up and said, "Can you come help me?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I can't get out of my chair." I said, "What do you mean you can't get out of your chair?" And he's like, "Dude, I've been sitting in my chair for 18 hours.
He's wedged in there.
I can't move my legs."
That
I'm
is
like, what are you doing sitting in your chair for 18 hours?
Well, and they've got the games now where you can play other people at the same time, right?
Yes. In fact, I have one game where you can actually play 4 people at the same time in the same room, or you can play up to 32 people online.
It's amazing. Leonard in North Carolina, east of the Rockies. Welcome to the show. Hey, Leonard, go ahead.
I was just wondering, what would be the best way to start writing science fiction novels or books or stories? What would be the best way to get started in it?
What tips can you give him, Marvin?
Yeah, so the first thing you'd want to do is, just like any other author, you'd want to write an outline about what you need to write. Do some research on the content that you want. Make sure you're not like plagiarism or copying somebody else's material. And even if you are inspired by movies or video games or comic books or anything, a story from somebody else, put a twist on there. I always think of this way: you got a beginning of a book, you got a middle of a book, and then you got the twist.
And you have to have a twist.
Yes.
I mean, that just hooks the whole thing. Now, with your novel, let's assume it turns into a series, a television series, or one movie or something like that. Will you have much input into the script?
Yes. In fact, because I had written all the books, one thing that I would want to try to do, and everybody always tells me I should do this, even though I'm not an actor, I have been to acting school. My daughter's been to acting school. I know how it's like to be an actor. I have already reserved a spot in the film to actually be one of the characters in there.
Oh, really? What
Yeah.
part would you play?
So there's this guy that's named Cosino. He's actually the father of the bad guy, but he's actually a good guy because he kind of gets with Sergeant I-Waggit, and he ends up becoming his best friend.
Now, in terms of the real Sergeant I-Waggit, is he aware that he is this hero in a series of books?
Yes. He knows that he's a hero today. I still keep in contact with this, the real soldier. And
how old would he be?
Know,
how old would he be today, roughly?
I would have to do some math on it, but I do know the last time I met him when I was in the service, he was like 35, and that was, I don't know, back in 2002.
20 years ago?
Yeah.
35. So he might be late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, about late 50s, something like that.
Something like that. Is he honored to be part of these books?
Yes. He loves the science fiction part of it and the fact that he's involved in it, even though he can't physically be in it. He wishes that he could be part of being in, like, the films and stuff, but because of the nature of his body and everything, he just can't. But he does love the fact that, he agreed a long time ago for me to use his name, and he says, I just want you to be able to succeed and, enjoy the content. And he loves being the lowest ranking person and end up being a hero at the end.
That's fantastic. We're taking calls with Marvin Sunderland of Marvelous Entertainment about his book series, his video games. And if you have played video games, share that story on just what it was like for you. That's what we'd like to find out when we come back in a moment. The website, of course, is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. He's got a few of them. Lex has them all taken care of for you. And I'll be back in a moment to tell you what's in store next hour as well. This is fantastic. Marv, this is something that you love doing, don't you?
Yes, sir. It is something I always had a knack for.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. We're going to come back in a moment and take some final calls with you and also chat a little bit more about video gaming, which is a huge industry these days. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. We'll be back with final calls with Marvin Sunderland as we talk about his work writing these incredible sci-fi novels and also gaming. And if you're a gamer, jump aboard. Tell us what it's been like for you. Next hour, Joe Diamond back with us. We're going to talk about haunted locations. Make sure you're part of the program. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Marvin Sunderland. Our last segment here with him. His website's marvelous.com. Or, of course, he's got the new one, I-Waggit.com. And that one is up and running already, Marvin?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I bet you developed it, too.
Yeah, so we have a team that put that together. The members area, however, will be available on February 1st.
Excellent. Let's go to the calls. Joe in the Bronx, welcome to the program. Joseph, go ahead.
Hey, George. How are you?
All right, Joe. Great.
Interesting show. Marvin, I'd like to ask your advice on this. What type of actor do you think would be best to portray Waggit?
That's actually a really good question. So if you take Bill Pullman, which he used to play like Alien, or play Hudson in Aliens, and you take William Shatner, and then you take the sergeant that's Leroy, I believe, that's from Full Metal Jacket. You put them together, that would be the main character.
The sergeant from Full Metal Jacket was hilarious, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was one of a kind, but that would be interesting. Bill Pullman's not with us anymore, but he was a great actor.
Oh, yes, he was a fantastic actor.
Now we take text and tweets. Tom, what do you have for Marvin?
Hey, Marvin, this one from Marilyn in Georgia. She says, please ask Marvin if he thinks AI will someday replace doctors and surgeons.
What do you think of that, Marv?
That is actually a very good observation on that. It is a good possibility that AI will replace the doctors for when they go into surgery, only because of the fact that the arms could physically go down there and perform the surgical procedures, but without having like someone that's nervous or their hands are moving around or something.
Yeah.
It'd be more precision. But then again, it's only as good as the person that programs it. But AI also rewrites his program too.
I'm amazed with some of the AI and abilities that they have now in surgery, which helps these surgeons and doctors do all kinds of things with precision. It's just remarkable, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Not only that, but like not even just in surgery itself, but also in all kinds of other different areas, like cutting metal and stuff like that. We just push a button and it just does it.
It does it. It really does. Let's go east of the Rockies. Jimmy's with us in the Poconos out there in Pennsylvania. Hey, Jimmy, go ahead.
Hi, George. How you doing?
Wonderful.
Hi, Marvin. Marvin, I just wanted to ask you a question. I play a lot of mobile games. I particularly like PUBG, if you're familiar with it. It's a 10-cent game. It's PlayerUnknown's Battleground. It's amazing to me that you can all get on an airplane and you're playing 100 different people from all over the world. And the next thing that totally amazes me is people make a really big living off of streaming this and entering tournaments. These people are treated like athletes.
You're breaking up a little bit, Jimmy, but we picked that up right at the end. How did they make money on this, Marv?
How do they make money on this?
How do these game developers make money like this? Not selling the games, but being part of putting 200 people together and stuff like that. I mean, Yeah,
so there's usually like a really big database to add all those kind of people to it. The money usually comes from either people paying into it to watch something. It's getting really big in the world.
Like an entry fee?
Yeah, there could be an entry fee in there. Also, people could be just watching the game without even just playing it, just as a viewer. and it's becoming bigger and bigger in this world.
They have to pay for that too?
Some people do.
Wow.
I do know sometimes a lot of these games have coins in there, and you can use whatever coins you make over a time of playing it. And they always call it download for free and pay to win kind of thing.
Let's go out to Wisconsin. First-time caller, Jonathan is with us. Hey, John, go ahead.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
I kind of had like a few things I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
So about 20 years ago or so, I read a science fiction book about a man who stole the space shuttle and he flew it to the moon to find like helium-3 or like a mysterious blue mineral. And you know, it was a good book. However, well, this year, like in September of 2022, Popular Mechanics published a story about China finding a mineral on the moon, like Changasite, and so you know, I haven't really heard a lot about this kind of discovery over here, but I think something like this could, you know, really change our energy needs and our on the world. So I guess my question is like your guest, does he use like obscure discoveries and things like this to help him with his ideas for his books, or you know, have you heard about something like this?
All right, well, let's find out. Where do you get your ideas, Marvin, for your books?
Yeah, so most of my ideas are either getting from my brain itself. I do manifest a lot of information only because of the fact that I had watched a tremendous amount of films, read a lot of comic books, and read a lot of books over in the past, and playing a lot of video games. And over the time, eventually something is going to twist itself up and kind of manifest a little differently. And plus, my neighbors, sometimes they'll just come out and say some weird stuff. And it just...
So realistic events sometimes trigger an idea, huh?
Yes, absolutely. And most of the time it'll trigger it when I'm driving or sitting in line somewhere in a restaurant. I'll have to grab like a napkin and write it down real fast, or I'll just at the moment I'll forget. But I do have a photographic memory on as far as a certain amount of content, so I can look at it and be like, all right, let's lock that down.
What has been for you the most positive moment writing these novels?
So I would say the most positive moment would be my family encouraging me to write everything, telling me to keep going and not stop. There's been times where I wanted to put the pencil down and say no more, and it just gets real frustrating. But then they're like, you can't stop. You just got to keep going, keep moving on.
Let's go to Tucson, Arizona. Steven's with us. Hey, Steve, go ahead.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello, sir.
I was a Spec 5 for 10 years, a tool and die maker. They taught me CAD. I was doing 3D animation, solid modeling back in the 90s, and I've worked on a PhD. And I want to address the issue about AI.
All right.
This is why I think it's dangerous. And you're right, it depends on the programming or the paradigm. But intelligence that can write itself without morality is not human.
It's also dangerous, to be sure, and you're absolutely right about that, Steve. One day that's going to bite us. What do you think, Marvin?
Oh, yes, absolutely. One day it's going to come back on us, and we're going to wish that we did not create the AI at the level it's going to be at.
When it starts thinking for itself, we're in deep trouble.
Yeah, that's when, like, the movie War Games comes in, you know, where the kid wants to play war instead of chess, and it takes over.
It takes over
Literally
the game.
Tells everybody what's going on.
And it makes people think there's a real war underway.
Right. And that could be reality, you know, with AI.
Eric's with us in Indiana. Hello, Eric.
Hello, George. I wanted to ask your guest tonight if he thinks that maybe it could be possible that AI could take over the presidency or the government even.
I don't know about the presidency, but it surely could take over the government. Don't you think, Marvin?
I believe so. AI has taken over phone systems before, so it's a good possibility of, people are on there and they're chatting or whatnot. I mean, lip syncing is one thing. People can be on national TV or whatnot giving their speech, and then all of a sudden something flicks and they're saying something else.
What has fueled the graphics of video gaming? Computers?
I would say the graphic part of the computers have evolved into this unit where they can take like a three-dimensional image and make it into a flat screen. So it still looks 3D like if you're there, but it's on a flat screen. Yeah.
Let's go to Gene in Texas. First-time caller for him. Hi, Gene.
Harry, how are you, Mr. George and Marvin?
Great, thank you.
Actually, I had a question about if Mr. Marvin's on his game, if he's got probes jumping out of nowhere.
What do you mean by probes?
Well, like lights besides because there's a bunch of activity going on out here. I'd say about 25 miles south of San Antonio. There's so much. There's spaceships and they disappear. Believe it or not. And I mean, I'm just curious why anybody hasn't said anything about it. Or, I mean, it's been happening for the last 8 months, and we've been trying to keep up with it, but they're starting to come down. And I heard you say something about coming down and
an invasion.
Yes, sir, invading us. You're right.
You got to be careful about that. When you put together your video gaming ideas, how do you chronologically think it through, Marvin?
Yeah, so usually I'll when I start with the video game ideas, I'll think of what kind of characters and plot and setting that it's going to be set into, and then I'll take that into the next step of start building each level one at a time, and then just kind of move from there into the chronological order of however the game's going to be built. We have a game right now that we're in process where it's more like a space shooter kind of thing. It's side scroller. You can do a joystick, and you can also do, like gesture inputs, which makes it a little bit more difficult.
Are there some people where the video game has literally been their life? I mean, you were talking about your friend who got melted into his chair because he was sitting there too long. I mean, I would assume there's some gamers who just spend their life gaming.
I know a couple of people where you have two different types of people out in the world. You got these gamblers, right, that have a gambling addiction. And then now we have gamer addictions. I know two people where they'll spend their entire check on a game, and they're actually borrowing money just to pay their rent.
Wow. Now, can you win money with these games, or you're just spending it just to play it?
It depends on the situation of the game. Now, if there's contests in the game, you can win money out of it. Or if you're playing like an actual gambling game or an event, like when they do these events, they do have games in there where people can sign up. It's more like a gambling kind of thing. You just bet on whatever, and if you win some big chunk of money or something.
What's the most somebody's won that you know
of? One person I know, I believe he won about $20,000 in a game.
Jeez.
And the funny thing was, he was playing, now it was more of a casino game, and instead of going to the casino, he had this bad casino addiction. And with this addiction, he had to stay home because his doctor kept telling him, you don't need to go there, you're going to spend all your money. Well, he ended up spending a majority of his money on this game, and then one day it paid off. But that money went right back into it.
Oh, he blew it again, right?
Yeah, right.
Jeez. Marvin, thank you again for being on the program. Good luck with the websites and the games. And when can we expect the second 7-novel series?
So I'm in the process of writing the first book of the second series right now. I would give it at least
a couple of years,
at least a month for each series, or each book. So we're looking about 6 to 8 months from now to have that next set out.
That's fantastic. Thanks again, Marvin. It's really good to have you on the program. Marvelous entertainment. We've talked a lot about it in the past. We'll talk more about it in the future as he continues developing the things that he develops. Up next, a few haunted locations. That's up next. Joe Diamond back with us, America's greatest mind reader. He's next on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to talk about some haunted locations, seances, and some of the strange things he has done. So stick with us. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Joe Diamond may look like a normal guy, but he has turned his fascination for the strange and mysterious into a full-time career. He is even a world record holder for solving the world's largest corn maze blindfolded. He even hacked the Pentagon on live radio. Yep, we'll talk about that. He's the longest artist in residence at the Dole Mansion in Crystal Lake, Illinois, and he's the official mind reader at the luxurious Maxwell Mansion in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Both historic buildings are haunted. Joe, welcome back. How have you been?
I have been good, George. It's great to talk to you. It's great to hear your voice, and it's great to be back on the program.
It's great to have you back. I had such a great response when you were on with me last year. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back. So how is America's greatest mind reader?
Let me just read his mind real quick. He's good. He's good. It's been a whirlwind since the last time I was on the show. I've been traveling all over the country doing shows in various theaters. You know, the first time I was on the show, I was doing mind reading shows over Zoom because we were all still under lockdown at the time, and travel restrictions were very, emphasis on the strict. But now that everything is opening back up, I've been able to travel all over the country. In the last year, I've been to both coasts, literally coast to coast, just like on your program.
Yeah.
I went to Bar Harbor, Maine, and did a run of shows at a lovely improv theater there. I did a couple corporate events in Austin, Texas, and also filmed some content for my friend's YouTube programs. He actually has his own production company on a former cult compound down there and former nudist colony, which is pretty amazing. And so yeah, when we're there, it's literally a magical place that you can kind of feel the history of. They have a literal stone circle where they used to have quote unquote meetings and campfires. So that's always exciting to go there. And then yeah, this last Halloween, I teamed up with a good friend of mine, a psychic medium, and we did shows in the Dole Mansion in Crystal Lake. I did my mind reading show to start the evening off, and then she did paranormal ghost tours of the mansion afterwards for our 13 VIP ticket holders. And that was all Halloween weekend, and we even did this last, or a version of it this last weekend for Friday the 13th, where I started the evening off with some mind reading, and then she held a seance for the second hour.
Joseph, what keeps driving you? I mean, you're so busy.
A lot of things. I think a big part of it is just the feeling of being blessed, because I used to grow up reading all these books about, people like Uri Geller, people like, just...
And Uri's going to be my guest Friday night, by the way. I'll tell him hi for you.
The fact I'm on the show, period, is a dream come true. The fact I'm going to be on within a week of him is amazing. I did get a chance when I hosted a radio show for a few years in the Wisconsin area. I did get a chance to have him as a guest, and that is still up on YouTube. Wonderful, wonderful human being, one of my childhood heroes, and just still a fascinating human. And yeah, and the fact that I get to all the stuff I used to play make-believe with as a kid. I used to read books on, magic and spells and UFOs and crop circles and haunted locations. I used to watch the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray.
Over and over again, I bet.
Yeah, literally. And funny story, I was born in Woodstock, Illinois, where they filmed that movie. It's not Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. It is Woodstock, Illinois, standing in for Pennsylvania. It's also where Orson Welles is from. And so seeing that, my hometown literally in a movie was kind of surreal and awesome. And that got me into Ghostbusters and the paranormal and all this stuff I got to make believe with as a kid got to be my actual career as I grew up. So I think the drive literally comes from just, wanting to make all that stuff I got to make believe as a kid a reality now as an adult.
What would you coin yourself as, Joe, if you had to come up with a title?
A lot of people have asked me that question. I like Mind Reader just because it doesn't have a lot of baggage like the term psychic. Even Uri Geller himself has stuck with mystifier and spoonbender,
mentalist,
and so on. Mentalist. This is going to sound very strange. I don't feel comfortable with the title psychic because I believe we're all psychic. That'd be like just saying I'm human. Yeah, like, hi, I'm Joe Diamond. I'm a human. I believe we all have, these abilities to a large degree, which is why I have no problem saying, I have, psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, because I think we all do. We all have the ability to, tune into each other. We've all had moments of premonition. We've all had moments of, coincidence or synchronicity. It's just a matter of, I'm not saying there's always something more, but there could be, and that's important to pay attention to. And so I think, I kind of just rely on, me being me. Now, a few years ago, yourself and a couple magazines started calling me America's greatest mind reader, and that has kind of stuck. So I'll take that, and I think that's what when I tour now, that's what they put on the posters and everything, because that's what I do. I stand on stage and tell people details like names of their friends and family, their star signs. Sometimes even we get into like secret memories. Occasionally, with people's permission, I'll try and guess their PIN code, or like an old PIN code, or like an old password. And then my favorite thing to do lately is to show how ingrained this is with all of us, and send thoughts out to the audience and see how many people pick up on it. Because again, I do believe telepathy is a two-way street. But I prefer to see myself first and foremost as an artist, as a purveyor of mystery. Like when people come to my shows, they're coming, I try to think of it as like a real life Twilight Zone episode. They're coming to a haunted location. There's only 13 tickets available. Why are there only 13 tickets available? Or even, one of my big theater shows I've got coming up which is tied to that Groundhog Day movie, which we can talk about later. We're coming to this historic location. We're going to be locked in a room with a man who can just look at us and read our minds. What is that going to look like? And I get to not just, write an episode of The Twilight Zone, but I get to put people through that in real life.
You've got a theater show coming where 400 plus people are going to be there, right? And
yes.
You're going to read their minds, all of them?
Kind of, yes. So the way the show is going to work, it is at the Woodstock Opera House. Now, going back to
in Illinois,
Groundhog
right?
Day. Yes, in Woodstock, Illinois. In the movie Groundhog Day, when Bill Murray jumps out of that building, there's a sequence in the movie where he's just, killing himself over and over because he's reliving the same day over and over. And at one point, he jumps out of a large tower. That is the Woodstock Opera House. It is one of the most haunted locations in the state. It is the first stage Orson Welles ever directed a play on. It's also the first stage he ever acted on. And there's lots of great history there. Lots of amazing people have gone through there. And it has been my dream for years to do a show there. And they reached out to me at the end of last year about doing my full evening show, and I will be doing that. And the ground floor is already pretty much sold out at the time of us talking right now. I think there's like 3 or 4 single seats left on the ground floor.
Good for you.
They're still in. Thank you. And there's still, over 100 seats left in the balcony, but that's where it's going to get really fun. I actually I restructured one of the pieces that I normally do in my shows specifically for using someone in the balcony. So the way the shows normally work is when I'm brought into a theater or like a company event or something like that, I usually have the CEO or, someone everyone in the group or like the high school, for example, knows, pick the people so that way they know nothing is set up ahead of time. In this show, because it's going to be so close to Groundhog Day, and the groundhog is literally the most famous psychic in town, the gag is going to be, I am the second most famous psychic in town, so we're going to have a little stuffed animal groundhog. It's really cute and really soft, and we're going to toss that around the room to pick people at random, including up in the balcony. So that way everyone knows there's no way anything can be set up, and also, it being my hometown, there will be people who I will just simply know. I got an email from my second grade teacher saying I'll be there.
I love it.
I can't really be like, I don't know you, if that happens.
Joe, you've grown up to be such a great young man, she'll say.
Oh yeah, hopefully. So I actually do a couple. Like I said, I do a couple points in the show where I think of something and I project the thoughts out to the audience, and I give them all a chance to read my mind, which gives people a chance to see how this stuff really works, give people a chance to see what it feels like to get it right, what it feels like to get it wrong. It also gives me a chance to see who else in the room it can be, will be perfect for the next part of the show. So that said, everyone will be involved in that part. My grand finale, as the show goes along, each experiment uses more and more people. My grand finale alone uses about 30 people at once.
That's huge. Now, is there a haunted seat in that theater?
Yes. So the way that it's been told over the years is that seat DD 113, it's up in the balcony, is haunted by the ghost of an actress named Elvira. Now, legend has it that during rehearsals, when actors are on stage and they're doing their lines and running through things, when they look up there, they can kind of start to see that seat lower as if an invisible force is sitting in that seat. And every once in a while, if someone does really well in a scene or in a rehearsal, they'll hear applause from up there, even though no one is up there. Now, over the years, people attributed it to the spirit of a woman. There are some articles saying that a woman jumped out of the tower. There's some articles saying that it was a scorned lover who was an actress who hanged herself from the tower. Unfortunately, the more I looked into it, the more we found out that the actress Elvira did not exist. It was very likely a campfire story made up by Paul Newman while he was an actor there. However, as you've talked about on the show before, the more and more and more a story is told, the more and more can take hold of the mind of other people. And also a good amount of hauntings, they might not be the spirits of departed souls, but they very often can be psychokinetic activity. And a lot of times that psychokinetic activity can create something known as a tulpa, which a lot of quantum mechanics have actually looked into this. And it's basically where the human mind can create a ghost. It's where you can tell someone a place that isn't haunted is haunted enough, and it starts to take hold, which I believe is what's happened with that seat, because I have experienced interesting things in that seat.
Now, so if somebody, Joe, sits in that seat, does something happen to them?
Some people have experienced chills when they sat in that seat. I have, unfortunately, it's so well known, and they even have a plaque on that seat, so it'd be impossible to do any kind of scientific testing to, like, just for example, bring a medium in and see if they could sense anything about that seat. That said, there's lots of anecdotal evidence about that seat, and I don't know why it's necessarily that exact seat number, but again, my theory is that was probably picked at random by, again, maybe Paul Newman, or, he told that story to someone who told the story to someone. Oh, maybe it was somewhere up there. I think that one on the end. And now that's taken hold. And now that has, enough people look at it and wonder about it and concentrate on it. It literally physically manifests something in that seat. That said, too, there has been one death in the building.
In the building? What happened?
In the building. In the early 1900s, a fire broke out during a performance.
Oh, jeez.
The audience consisted of mostly men. I'll give you a very quick guess as to what the performance was, George. I'm curious if you can guess what the performance was. The audience was completely men.
The audience was completely men.
Mm-hmm.
What was the performance? I have no idea, Joseph.
I'll give you one more hint. It's also a sport.
Is it had to do with baseball?
No, it was a boxing match.
Oh.
It was a boxing match, and
I'm thinking some kind of theater. They had a ring there and everything.
Well, no, it was a ring, but they did it on the stage. And
was it a real boxing match, or was it part of a play?
It was a real boxing match being held in the theater, and the two vagrants had broken into the basement to keep warm, and they had started a fire, and the fire got out of hand, and surprisingly, the only fatality in the whole building was one of those two vagrants. All the boxers, all the people in attendance, all got out, especially considering many of the men leaped out the windows to the roof of the building next door to escape the fire.
It must have been one heck of a fire.
Yeah, and the building is still standing, which is also very, very strange. It was mostly smoke that went up. Unfortunately, a lot of that's where they used to keep a lot of the records in the town. So a lot of previous records of the town were lost.
And they think this dead vagrant haunts the place?
So, that's what I think, because eventually when, this story takes hold of, this made-up actress and, they keep saying it's this person who's completely made up, that would probably, tick off an actual ghost. So
it could. That's right.
Those are my two main theories because there's been a lot of stories of phenomena in that building.
Now, does that haunted seat have anything to do with the vagrant? Or is that something else?
Nothing that I've been able to find. Again, the closest I can connect that seat is with the stories of Elvira, which would connect with the Tulpa. Maybe.
And this isn't the Elvira we know from television, right?
No. And that's the other thing, too. Like, that the name's Elvira. Like, that's kind of clearly a made-up, like, a couple actors trying to, spook each other, like, type of name, So it's so that, but there's some really fun stories about it, and I kind of love that it's a legend that has kind of become real, that has kind of taken hold for some people. But also, I think the actual history is fascinating as well. Again, like it is amazing that this kind of pandemonium broke out of people leaping out of one building onto the roof of another, and yet only one fatality. That's a minor miracle in and of itself.
It sure is. Joe, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and talk more about haunted things. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with the greatest mind reader ever, Joe Diamond. Joe, Well, when you're at your events, do you use any kind of magic or anything, or how do you do this?
Yes, dot, dot, dot. Depends on your definition of the word magic. There's a lot of different techniques that go into mind reading, mentalism, all of it. First and foremost, at this point in my career, I am doing a show. In the past, I have done, tarot reading, palm reading, and still in my personal life, I do practice actual, what many would consider to be, ritual magic or magic with a K. My good friend Lauren Purcell, she just gifted me with a wonderful set of chakra stones, and I'm learning how to use those and learning how to, work with them and different kinds of energies and different kinds of things that, a lot of people find discomfort in. I think there's a lot of things people expect, like me to go like, oh yeah, it's all a trick, and then they're kind of thrown when I go, no, it's not. I mean, I think some witches call it spells. I think some Christians call it prayer. I think some spiritualists call it manifestation. Some atheists would probably call it the placebo effect, or some scientists would call it quantum physics. Some would call, I personally would call it magic, and that's definitely there. In my shows and in what people see when they buy a ticket and come to see me, I'm using everything from psychology to intuition. I won't lie, there are pure coincidences that just happen in my shows sometimes that just don't. I can't even explain. Perfect example. Once when I was doing a show for a sold-out theater in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I had a woman on stage. We were using ESP cards, which J.B. Ryan designed for genuine psychic tests, and
he was one of the best for testing.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone whose work I find very fascinating. You've had him on the show. Mitch Horowitz has done a lot of work with them and so forth, and has some fascinating research on them. So I use those in my show. And I had a woman mix them up, and I say to her, hand the card to anyone you'd like who you feel a connection with. And she started handing it to my wife's cousin, who happened to be in the audience, whose name was Ashley. Now, this woman who I had on stage that I was working with, her name was Ashley. And I realized this in this moment, that she had made this amazing connection. Now that was a true, genuine connection I had no control over. That said, I also have a background in theater. I have a background in improv, and that's where that part of my brain, that skill also came in to say not.
Do you dabble, Joe, with the supernatural?
Well, I think we all do. Again, I think we all have moments where we, are in traffic. I mean, give me the most hardened atheist, and I guarantee you they've still been in a rush in traffic and looked at that red light and gone, turn green, turn green, turn green. Like, that is magical thinking. That is dabbling in the supernatural. I think that is something that is just hardwired into us as humans.
What is I call it the wireless internet that we're all connected to.
Yeah.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Great psychic entertainer who's no longer with us, Bob Cassidy, called it the web before the World Wide Web. He talked about how, like, imagine there's like a string connecting your mind to the person sitting next to you, and a thread from their mind to that person. Now imagine you can leave your body and look out. You can see everyone connected through this web. So all you have to do is make a pluck on one strand here to make a an effect happen over here. And if that's the case, that explains telepathy, clairvoyance, sensing something before it happens. I mean, whether you see it as like an actual explanation or just a beautiful metaphor to explain what's happening, either way, I think it's a beautiful way to see and try to try to put into words or images. And I think that's what great art does. It tries to encapsulate the unexplainable. I think there's a difference between putting, trying to contain the unknown by putting a label on it, which people try to do with the word coincidence very often. They try to brush it off by saying it's just a coincidence.
Which I don't believe in. I think everything has a reason.
Yes, well, and I always try to point out that, well, if it's just a coincidence, that's more mysterious. The idea that no one or nothing made this weird connection happen is actually weirder if you really think about it. But even that, if you go beyond that, without trying to put like a label on something, I think trying to encapsulate it with a metaphor or art, like that's what we as humans have been trying to do since, recorded history.
Now, tell me,
grasp the unknown.
Tell me you're not going to go on stage and play Russian roulette with a staple gun. I heard rumors that you're going to do
Okay,
Are you crazy, Joseph?
So it's not as dangerous as it sounds. There are going to be 4 staple guns on stage. Only one will be unloaded. And on stage on February 25th at the Woodstock Opera House, someone in the audience is going to decide which one of those will be fired into my palm. I've done this a number of times over the years.
Have you ever been stuck by a staple?
Yeah. Believe it or not, the only reason I do it is because it's actually a tribute to my departed grandfather. He was a jack of all trades. He could fix anything. He could build anything. He built his own 4-story house on 7 acres of land just outside Chicago, near the Woodstock Opera House, actually, in a small little town called Bull Valley. It was, he could, on those 7 acres, he made all these trails. He could, mow all the grass. He could fix the lawnmower. I need my wife's help to, change a light bulb, so I didn't inherit any of this from him. But he only got injured on the job once. I mean, this man, dug out a whole trench and filled a pond on the land and all this stuff. But while he was re-roofing his house, his hand slipped, and he took a staple from his staple gun to the palm of his hand.
So that's why you do it.
He did what any Midwestern man would do. He pulled the staple out, cleaned the wound, cracked open a beer, and got back to work. And that was the one day
tough guy.
He didn't have his lucky pocket knife with him. It was still on his dresser. He didn't have it with him. And when he passed away, I inherited his lucky pocket knife.
Which will be with you on that night.
Yes, which will be with me on that night. Now, I also have a variety of, we'll just say, theatrical safety precautions. For example, the safe staple gun is epoxied shut because technically the only way this can go wrong is, let's say, a backstage stagehand needs a staple gun for something, happens to pick up the empty one, notices it's empty, and fills it with staples.
And so all 4 of them have staples.
Yes,
yeah,
yes. So there will always be one on stage with me that is indeed empty.
Well, are you hoping that the person who picks the staple gun picks the one that is unloaded?
Yes, they will be holding my grandfather's pocket knife while they make the choice.
All right, now that's a 25% chance that they're going to pick the right one you need.
Yes.
There's a 75% chance you're going to get a staple in your palm.
Yes, that is correct, George. There is...
I don't like those odds for you, Joe.
Well, thank you for your concern. I appreciate it.
I am.
That's why I like doing it. So I haven't gotten a staple in the hand yet. The line I say on stage, and it's absolutely true. We do have a first aid kit on hand. The line I say is, if this does go wrong, and I happen to get 2 little pinpricks in my palm, we'll take a quick 2 to 3 minute break. We will clean the wound. We'll put a bandage on it, and just like my grandfather, I will get back to work. I will finish the show.
Now, are you gonna show everybody all 4 of these staple guns and then kind of mix them up?
Yes, they will be mixed up. There will be 4 people on stage. The person holding my grandfather's pocket knife chooses which person on stage gets which staple gun, and then we have to make it completely blind, and so they don't think I'm like influencing them or doing anything subliminal. We have slips of paper that each tells the person whether they're going to staple into a pad that we have or into my hand, and those are mixed up, and they choose which one they get. So then 3 of them staple into a pad, and then 1 of them is stapled into my hand.
You do know how bad somebody's going to feel if you get stapled.
Yes, and I do. This is the one point in the show where I tell people I need some people who are fairly handy, who are used to using staple guns and are okay with doing this. I tell people what we're going to be doing before we do it, so no one feels, oh my gosh, I've been brought up here, and he tricked me into doing something I'm not comfortable with.
Let me ask you this, Sandra. Where does your mind reading capabilities help you here?
So a couple places. Number one, as I don't just hand it to anybody, I actually pass the pocket knife around the room, close my eyes, and I wait until I intuitively get the sense to say stop on the person who I feel is the most empathic for it and will make the right choice. There have been times where I've said stop, I open my eyes, I see who's holding the pocket knife, and I go, never mind, let's keep going, and we do that.
Okay.
So that's one secret. The other secret is once they've made their choice and the person who is apparent, they've locked in who they believe is holding the safe staple gun steps off to the side, I have 2 of the 3 remaining people fire their staple guns into the pad first to see if their choices were correct. And then the last 2 we find out simultaneously. So theoretically, and I always say, if you made any other choices, that staple would have gone into my hand, that staple would have gone into my hand. But letting you in on a little bit of the math here, that's also eliminating. So if this has gone wrong and one of those staple guns doesn't fire, well, it's now gone wrong. And it's like, well, it's a good thing. we,
Now, when I have tarot card readers on the show, they do some stuff with our audience, or psychics, they do some stuff with our audience. We're going to take calls with you next hour, but I mean, what can you do with them, with your abilities, your mental abilities?
I'll tell you what. Before the calls, if you would like, right before that, we can try something where I can try to project some things out to you and all the listeners at once, and then when we take the calls, we can see how many of the things they got right. How does that sound?
And then you can tell us at the end of the hour what they were.
Sure. Yeah. We'll start at the. So what we can do is I can project the thoughts, and we'll take the callers, and we'll see how many of them got it right.
That's fascinating. I'm going to do something with you right now. I'm going to think of a number between 1 and 5. When I tell you I've thought of it, I want you to guess it, and then I'll tell you. I won't lie to you, of course. And stand by numbers between 1 and 5, which means you have a 20% chance of getting this right.
I do have a 20% chance.
So here we go. Hold on. Okay, I sent it.
Okay. I'm going to be honest.
I will be.
No. I'm going to be honest. I actually, I always go with my first gut, but I normally don't get the guts to change my mind, which I am getting right now, but I'm going to stick to my rule of not changing my mind. The very first thing that came into my mind was 3. But before you tell me if I was right or wrong, my gut was telling me I should change my mind to 4, but I always say stick with your initial gut.
It was 4.
Stick with my initial. It was 4. Oh, dang it. Oh, my gosh.
It was 4. It was my favorite number. It's the day I was born, and I just flashed it in my head. And
Okay. So that's a big part of it. So a big part of what I say is, to not filter, to just go with what comes to you immediately. Intuition is thinking without thinking, and to go with whatever comes to you now.
I wonder how many people listening thought of 4.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So.
And again, you only have a 20% chance of getting it right.
You do. Now that said, too, as people like again, Mitch Horowitz have pointed out.
Why did you change your mind when you had it right?
Well, because 3 was the very first thing that came into my head, and then
but you were thinking of the 3 before I sent the 4. I think that's where
true.
That's what happened to you.
That could have been the thing. But the other thing too to keep in mind is again when you're dealing with like the 5 ESP symbols and everything, you always have to get rid of the first 25% of things that are right usually when they do all those long ESP experiments.
All right, Joe, we're at the top of the hour. We're going to take a break and come back and chat with you. We'll take phone calls, chat more. And then we'll have you do your mental telepathy thing before we take What makes a place haunted? Check in with us. Make a call to Joe Diamond as we talk with him about his incredible abilities. We're going to do a little mental telepathy with you before the calls, too, when we come right back on Coast to Coast. And welcome back. We're back with the mind reader, Joe Diamond. His website is americasgreatestmindreader.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Joe, let's do this little mental telepathy and see where we take it. Right at the end, will you give us the answers?
Yes, of course. So I'll be talking directly to the listeners and you for the next few moments.
All right.
I will think of a memory and project it across the airwaves to live listeners and even listeners of the recorded podcast. This should work for them as well. During this time, if anyone's listening with anybody, even if you're listening alone, don't say anything. Don't say your answers out loud. And don't think about it too much. Again, intuition is thinking without thinking, so go with whatever comes to you naturally. Also, real quick, another moment of honesty, George. This takes a great level of concentration for me to broadcast my thoughts on this level. So I'm actually wearing a blindfold right now to block out the distractions while I'm on the phone with you.
Okay.
It's not required, but if you wish and if the listeners wish, you can close your eyes. Obviously, if anyone's driving or anything, don't do that. Only close your eyes if it's safe to. But if it's safe to and you want to, you can close your eyes as well and open your mind to the thoughts that I will attempt to project directly from my mind to yours. And here we go. I want all of you to go inside of yourself and really pay attention to the thoughts inside your mind and any feelings in your body right now, your organs, your blood pressure, your heart rate. Right now, focus on your temperature and notice whether you feel yourself becoming warmer or colder over the next few seconds. And remember what you felt. I'll send another thought to you now, a color. Allow a color to come into your mind as I send it to all of you now. Again, remember the color that came to you. In a moment, I want you to pay attention to the sounds you experience inside your own mind. If you aren't wearing headphones, you can make this easier by actually covering your ears and notice what sounds you hear. Remember the sounds you experienced, and now I will send to all of you 2 simple shapes, one inside the other, like a square inside of a rectangle. Don't pick those, though. I just said them. Allow these 2 simple shapes to come into your mind as I project them to you now. All right. And let's see how everyone did, and people can call in and let us know how many they got right. The memory I was
and you'll
thinking
tell
about
us right at the end of the program.
well, here, what I'll do is I'll tell you what I was thinking about, and people can call in and let us know how many they got right. That way you know I'm being honest. The first thought that I imagined was myself walking on the sand of a beach beneath a blistering red-hot sun. So if you felt your temperature rise, if you felt warmer, or maybe received the image of sun, or maybe even felt sand, you successfully received this thought. Next, I turned my attention to the blue water in front of me. So if you or any of the listeners received the color blue, you were also successful with that. I then imagined myself listening to the sound of the water washing on the shore. So if you heard or imagined the sound of water, you were successful. And finally, I saw inside my imagination reaching out and with one finger in the sand drawing a circle and a triangle. So if anyone got, 1, 2, 3, or even all 4 of these correct, you are extremely intuitive. I'd love to hear, again, from the listeners, and we can start right away with you, George. How many of these did you get right?
Well, I'll tell you. The first one, I was thinking of my temperature at 98.6. Not hot, not cold.
Okay, so right down the middle, okay?
The second, the color, blue.
So you got that spot on.
I got that right. The third, the sound, I was thinking of a scream.
Interesting. Okay, interesting.
The fourth, I was thinking of a ball, which is a circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the next one, I was thinking of a pyramid, which is a triangle.
Okay, so yes, you got 3 out of the 4.
3 out of 3.
So I think you did really well.
3 out of them.
You did really, really well.
So here's the question. Is it you to me, or is it me picking up you? Who's the one doing the work here?
It's both of us. It's all of us.
Like a team effort?
Yes, it's absolutely a team effort. What I say in my shows is if you get, all of these right, these are the most intuitive people. These are the kinds of people who often consider themselves psychic and are prone to things like precognitive dreams and paranormal occurrences. Obviously, the way I explain it to people is I need someone who is just as good of a person who can send the thoughts as me receiving them. And actually, I can do much better with someone who is a much better sender than if I'm having an off day and those kinds of things. Because if the person's just sitting there not really following the instructions, and in some ways it's kind of like hypnosis in that the person needs to, follow the instructions and go with it. It's a collaboration. It's like any form of communication. If just for example, let's say this call dropped and we both tried calling each other at the exact same time, well, no connection is made because we're both trying to send. If we both sit there waiting for the other person to call, no connection is made because we're both trying to receive. One person needs to make the call and one person needs to pick up. So our minds are very much the same way. So I think a lot of times, and I think that's why the Ryan experiments are so important, because they made it very clear in those experiments who the sender was and who the receiver was, and why those steps are so important with those types of things. And also, if you got none of these right, that's okay too. These are usually some of our biggest thinkers I've found. These are the types of people who really think about what they're going to think about. These are typically the ones who, when asked for simple shapes, they think of a star inside of a dodecahedron. They're much better at generating ideas rather than being open to other people's ideas. But the truth is we need, all kinds of people who think in all these kinds of ways in order to work as a society and as a species.
Now, the fact that I got so many correct, what does that tell you?
Obviously, you're extremely intuitive. You've had many paranormal occurrences, and I would say definitely definitely this is the time of year as well where people like you, I would say, have a lot more precognitive dreams than during the other times of year as well. So I think probably, especially for you, it makes sense why you were, so open to this. And also since we were both, able to prepare and get into the right mindset and not just, not just, dive right in and everything. We were able to kind of focus a little bit more and both get ready.
Okay, let's take some calls. Let's start by going to Joe, Long Island, New York, east of the Rockies. Go ahead, Joseph.
Oh, hello, Joe. It sounds like you should be on Fear Factor, but I have two questions and a comment. One would be if you're kind of having a rough patch, I'll give a small example with these people that call, those scam callers. It's getting a lot of them. And then I got a call from somebody. I started to kind of almost yell at them. And it turned out to be somebody from Ireland that I never met that was an actual relative doing a roots thing. So I almost hung up on the guy, and he turned out to be a nice guy. So how do you see the possibilities in the midst of, like, the carnage? That would be my first question. My second question, I'll go to the movie The Game of Thrones. You had those white wolves coming after the people. Like, how would you know that it's just them and not maybe someone else behind them? And then with the White Walkers, if you fight them, when do you disengage and just run? Because eventually, they're going to get you, And then my comment is Padre Pio, that priest from Italy, did confessions where people say he knew stuff about them that he could not possibly know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll definitely. I just wrote down that name because I haven't heard of this priest, but this sounds like a fascinating story. So thank you for sharing that.
He would bleed. He would bleed what they call the stigmata, the wounds of Jesus.
Oh wow! Yeah, I remember reading about that in school, but I honestly haven't read about anything like that in years. So yeah, so I'd love to look into that more. So thank you for turning me on to that. I'll be completely honest. I checked out of the first season of Game of Thrones, so I don't know what any of that means, of what you said. I'll be completely honest. I completely tuned out, so I don't know what any of that means. When it comes to knowing when to engage or not engage with, so many, scammers and so many people, not knowing how to approach those things and everything. In the real world, I've noticed it's really important for me, especially since this is my job. I've noticed it's very good to just not rely so much on telepathy, but more so rely on empathy, and to just kind of, again, my friend Lauren Purcell, a psychic medium, she's really wonderful, and she's really taught me a lot about cord cutting, which is a wonderful thought process and ritual where you just kind of, imagine a cord between you and the person, and you're cutting it and not wishing them bad, not wishing them good, just you go over there, I go over here, and, those kinds of things. And I've noticed doing that just allows me to work on my own things and not take things as personally. It still hurts, sometimes as well. I mean, I've noticed for me it's the opposite. I definitely don't get as ticked off at people as much. I definitely feel bad more, like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that, or that kind of thing, or I was trying to be funny, but I said a really stupid thing. And so I kind of go the opposite approach. But I think just trying to, not try to know everything, but just try to, put myself in the other person's, shoes and try to feel what they're feeling rather than think what they're thinking in my day-to-day life, I find is a better approach than trying to figure out what they're thinking, because it's that's my job. I don't want to mix my job up with my everyday life too much. I mean, again, I find all aspects of the world and the paranormal fascinating, and as much as I love my job and love my career, I want to make sure that I don't get too burned out.
Would you say, Joe, that your abilities are somewhat psychic?
Yeah. I mean, psychic. If you look at it in the in the dictionary, psychic is someone in touch with a non-physical force, which, probably isn't the best description because, Wi-Fi could be a non-physical force. Psychology could be a non-physical force. So in those senses, yes, of course. I mean, yes, a lot of things could be psychic, absolutely. I don't think what I'm doing is spiritual. I think, if that makes sense, for my work, if that makes sense. Again, I'm a very spiritual person in all aspects of my life, and I think that bleeds into my work, but I don't know if my work bleeds into my spirituality, if that makes sense.
Let's go to Huck, truck driving in Milwaukee. Welcome to the program. Hello, Huck.
Hey, George. Good morning.
Good to have you
As
on.
always, a fantastic show.
Thank you, sir.
Forgive me, but I forget your guest's name.
Joe.
Joe.
Joe Diamond, are you on 94 in Milwaukee?
No, I'm actually at my one of my terminals currently. I'm dropping a trailer.
Ah, nice.
So
nice.
I'm actually off the interstate right now.
Oh, nice.
So, but it would be 294.
Oh, 294. Yes.
So anyway, you are not very far from where I live, so I might be able to make your show at either one of your facilities. And here in a few hours, I will be at the head of Bray Road, near Elkhorn. And I'm curious if you've ever investigated that area.
The late Linda Godfrey did a great job with that, Joe. She passed away several months ago.
Yes. With the for anyone who doesn't know about the Beasts of Bray Road, definitely look it up. I don't know a whole heck of a lot about it. I have definitely driven through that area. There are, I find it fascinating. The bad news is I personally don't know a ton about the actual information and stories of that area. That said, the good news is I know a lot of people that do, one of which, George, is our very lovely mutual friend who introduced us, Varla Ventura. I was actually, when I first read about that creature and everything, I then cracked open one of her books and saw it there, and that was fascinating to see. A couple of my paranormal investigator friends have done some research in that area, and there's a couple other cryptid stories, like in the Wisconsin, Illinois border area. There was the Bull Valley Monster, which again is not too far from Woodstock, Illinois. And there's also stories of a potential sea serpent in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin as well. When it comes to cryptids and everything like that, I read about them and find them fascinating, but I haven't done a whole lot of research into those things. I leave that up to the experts. I'm purely an armchair fanboy when it comes to those things. But that said, if you can make it to the shows in Woodstock or any of the shows in Lake Geneva, again, everything, full schedules at americasgreatestmindreader.com.
The Bray Road Beast is supposed to be a werewolf first spotted in 1936 out that way.
Yeah,
creepy.
Yeah, and there was a sighting not too long ago, if I remember correctly, probably within the last 6 months.
Yeah, it's still out there.
Something. Yeah.
Let's go to Helena in California, first time caller. Hi, Helena.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Go ahead, hon.
Hello.
Hello, George. Hello, Joe. Thank you for accepting my call. First time I got through. Many tries.
Perfect.
So I'm calling about the thought transmission, and I got 2 out of the 4. And
which ones did you get, Helena?
Immediately, I got ocean, beach with cliffs above. The second one, I got red, and then I started overthinking it. I think what popped into my head was a red sun.
Yeah. You know what? I realize now, because I was thinking of, you're very spot on with the cliffs, because I was actually thinking about being in Hawaii with my wife, and there's some not full on cliffs, but there's some rocks and everything there. But there was like the red hot sun from the heat coming down on us. So the red probably was what confused you. So I'll give you credit for getting that, and I'll take blame for that. So I'll give you that one. So,
Helena, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll come back with you for your question for Joe Diamond in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. We'll be talking about miracles on our next Coast to Coast program, so join us and become part of the program. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Joe Diamond with us, the mind reader. Let's go back to Helena in California, first-time caller. Hi, Helena, welcome back.
Hello, thank you. Okay, so the third one was the sound. And again, I overthought this. Immediately I got, when you put a seashell to your ear and you hear the sound of the ocean, that's what I got immediately. But I actually wrote down wind. So I guess I lost that one, barely. And then the one that really surprised me was for the shape. Even before, Joe, you said now, I immediately saw a circle and a triangle.
You got those right. Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. Do you have a question, Helena, for Joe?
Well, not beyond how does it work. It really fascinated me. What an interesting experiment.
Explain that again, Joseph.
Yeah, so a big part of it is to not filter, just go with whatever comes into your mind. A big part of it is the two-way connection. You need someone who's a good sender. You need someone who's a good receiver, and also I don't think I'm special in this regard, Helena. I think a lot of listeners also felt telepathy and empathy with you, where first-time caller, you wanted to get through, and then we had to go to a break. We all felt that initial, like, oh, Helena, we're pulling through for you, so thank you for your patience and sticking through with us tonight. I really, really appreciate that you got through tonight. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you and I got to chat tonight through the magic of radio and our phones, and we got to connect not just telepathically, but also talk tonight. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I'm glad we got to chat.
Joe, I heard a few days ago on Friday the 13th you participated with a seance. What was that like?
Yes. Oh, it was fascinating. So the Dole Mansion is in Crystal Lake, Illinois, which is not the same as the Friday the 13th movies. Those are set in the fictional town of Crystal Lake, New Jersey, but just so happened to have a studio in an old house that is now turned into an arts park. So there's a few painters, a few photographers. There was a massage therapist in the building for a while. And on the third floor, there's a good friend of mine who's a psychic medium. And for Friday the 13th, we decided to team up, and I did a mind reading show to kick the night off and allow everyone to get to know each other. And then after that, we took a quick break and had some water and snacks. And then we all gathered in the room, and by candlelight, she led us through a seance, and it was very meaningful. It was very touching. It wasn't like the spooky movies where like the tables like lifted and like the paintings fell off the walls and the walls bled. She kind of guided us through a almost like a meditation to allow us to connect with loved ones, and it was a beautiful approach to just how to relate to those who have passed on, and how we can remain connected with them and with each other. And the really fun thing is she had little gemstones, which she allowed us to choose at the end of the night to remain grounded. And, it had, little tags of what each one meant and why we were drawn to them. And what was really great is each of the gemstones were carved into the shapes of skulls. So some people got like black tourmaline, and it was amazing how like couples each picked like the same stones, or like someone dressed all in black got the all black skull. It was really fascinating to see how different people were indeed drawn to certain colors and certain energies and such with that at the end of it as well, and how they just shared their beautiful stories of how some were able to connect with some of their loved ones. It was really, really wonderful and fascinating, and we're talking about doing more down the line.
Good for you. Let's go to Linda in Illinois. Welcome to the show. Hi, Linda.
Oh, I got to tell you about the seance I went to.
Aha, what was that like?
This was like, 30 years ago. I lived in a small town, and it was a church. Then off to the side of the church, she had a big room there at the church. So there must have been at least 30 people in the room, including me, my husband, and a friend of mine. And so we're sitting there, and she had the lights turned down to a bare minimum. And we're sitting there, and she's bowing her head and rocking, and we're trying to figure out what she's doing. But anyway, it's comical. I had a Timex watch, and if you pushed the button on it, it would light up. Well, I pushed the button on it to see what time it was, because we'd been there a while. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. And when I done that, she raised her head up, and she started carrying on that they were there with us right now. You know, they came to see us, and they were all there. And all it was my watch that lit up.
It was a sign.
Well, we got up and left.
What makes that happen, Joe?
I'm not sure. I mean, did you leave because you were uncomfortable? Did you leave because you just felt like...
We left because we thought she was stupid.
It just felt stupid? Just felt like it just wasn't going anywhere?
It wasn't. I didn't think it was real. None of us did.
Now, do you think it's real now, as you think back?
No, I still think it was fake.
Okay. Well, sometimes that happens. As a matter of fact, didn't you create such a storm, Joe, when some magicians and fake psychics heard about you?
Oof. Well, that was in regards to a technique that is normally used by them. Yes, it wasn't for seances. It was for something else. It was on my previous appearance. So if people want to go back and listen to that, yes, they can go back and listen to that. I did get a fair amount of emails about that, and all I can say about that is I said everything I need to say in the previous interview. So I will say here what I say to everyone else, which is, go into your archives and listen to the full episode. Then that's all I'll say.
It's right there for everybody, right?
Yep, it's right there. Yep. Don't listen to what a friend of a friend says I said on the show. Go back and listen to the full episode.
Elisa is with us in Happy Valley, Oregon. Welcome to the show. Hi, Elisa.
Hey, Joe. I mean, George and Joe.
Hi.
So, on the experiment, I saw the color red, and then when I covered my ears, I heard an inferno, and then I also, so I heard it, it flashed on me, and then I got the triangle and the circle, just flashed in, and so I don't know, it's like both visual and auditory. And then my question is about, what's the difference between a mind reader and a psychic? And I bet you're pretty good at remote viewing as well, I would think.
Oh yeah, I've dabbled with remote viewing. I haven't figured out ways to make it a part of my full regular shows. I've done.
I would bet you'd be pretty good, Joe.
Yeah. I've had some interesting success with it. It's hard to make work for a big or to communicate to a large group, if that makes sense, because you're just watching one guy draw something or sit in silence, and there's someone somewhere else, so it's a little hard from that situation. So the difference between a mind reader and a psychic, I'm going to answer that by answering a different question first. People often ask, what is the difference between a medium and a psychic? And the answer is a medium is a form of psychic. A medium is someone who is the medium between this world and the next. They communicate with the spirit realm. They communicate with spirits, the afterlife, those kinds of things. So a medium is always a psychic, but a psychic is not always a medium. A psychic can talk to the dead. They can see the future, they can hear the future, they can be telekinetic, they can, have a psychic can have a lot of different abilities, one of which is telepathy, one of which is, something called psychometry, which is something I've also used in my work a lot, where I'll hold on to an object or hold my hand near people, and you get a sense of that object and the vibrations it gives off. Psychometry literally means soul measuring, the idea that objects we carry with us can absorb a part of our personalities and maybe a part of our souls. So I'll do that, but I'll also do it with, just holding people's hands or holding my hands near them to try and pick up on, my impressions and my vibrations. So in much the same way, again, a mind reader may always be psychic, but a psychic may not always be a mind reader. And it's funny, my friend Lauren Purcell, who did the seance, it's funny because when she tells people she's a psychic medium, they always go, "Oh, really? Tell me what I'm thinking," which she can't do. And when I tell people, I'm a mind reader, they go, "Oh, can you speak to my dead relatives?" which I can't do. So it's funny how we each get people asking us to do what the other person does. And we're like, man, in a perfect world, we'd get people who would just ask us what the other person does, and vice versa.
Let's go to Wayne in the state of Maine. Hey, Wayne, go ahead, sir.
Hi there, George and Joe.
Hi there.
Good evening.
Hi, Wayne.
How you doing there? George, when you had mentioned pick a number from 1 to 5, instantly, like Joe, the number 3 came to mind. And I know your birthday is on the 4th, so sorry about that. It was only off by 1 date.
That's okay. George. It was close.
All right. When it came to the colors, immediately the color red entered my mind. But then for some reason, I said, no, not red. I said blue.
Got
so
it right.
My choice was blue. When it came to the sound, unfortunately, I've got tinnitus, and it's kind of bad. So ringing came to mind. Why wouldn't it? Ringing came to mind in that, and I was off on that. But when it came to the shapes, now wasn't there 2 shapes, Joe, that you were?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And I, for some reason, I envisioned a circle and a triangle in the middle of the circle.
Well, you still got it right.
Yep. But the triangle was in the middle of the circle, so if that makes a difference, I'm not sure. The vision of something. What was the next question? Something. I envisioned the ocean.
I was thinking of so we started off with the temperature.
The temperature.
I was kind of putting myself back into the memory with the temperature and so forth of being on the beach and everything.
Hot, cold,
and thinking about your internal temperature, which I think may have confused some people with the red. So, but that's the other fascinating thing with this too, is I now know, okay, that's maybe a little confusing for some people. That's the other great thing with programs like this. We get to have one of the world's largest, telepathy tests ever, and get all this fascinating insight from people, all over the country, and hear from people like you who have those moments like that, who see that. I'm really, really fascinated about ringing in the ears lately, because I actually experienced ringing in the ears during the seance on Friday the 13th too, right towards the end. and it was Lauren and I talked about it. We actually think it was Eliza Ringling. She was the wife of Al Ringling of Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey fame.
Interesting.
She actually bought the property and extended it in the 1920s at the Dole Mansion in Crystal Lake, and she actually did mind reading and fortune telling in the circus as well. So she's kind of a kismet spirit in all of this as well. And I think this was just her reminder that, like, yep, I'm still here. I'm watching over you guys, and I'm glad you're doing this kind of cool, weird work.
And if you live near Woodstock, Illinois, Joe's got his event on Feb 25th. Full information at his website, americasgreatestmindreader.com. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.